lot of fun. Oh, let me just tell you, technical difficulties everywhere. But we're back. And we've got Kevin and we've got Howard. We're going to be talking about 5G security. But first, I'm going to ask you, Howard, a question. Give me some good advice on managing IoT security.
To be pithy, minimize your blast radius
Okay?
as much as you possibly can.
That's pithy. We'll get into more detail there. Kevin, give me some bad advice on how to manage IoT security.
Well, IoT devices are sort of inherently secure on their own. So deploy them and hope for the best.
All right. Just lie. It sounds like what you need. Howard, give me some worse advice on managing IoT security.
So the worst advice. So then what I like to do with my IoT security is I like to leave the default username and password, but I really prefer to publish that to my firewall so that everyone has access.
Oh, these are some bad advice. Here we go, everybody.
Get ready. It's Super Cyber Friday.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Super Cyber Friday. I don't think we have closed captions, Veronica, who asked in the chat room. Today's topic is hacking 5G security. We're talking about IoT, and that's all intrinsically tied in to all of this. I hope my levels aren't too loud. Hey, it's an hour of critical thinking about the looming explosion of IoT on 5G networks. Hey, my guest today, you just met them, Howard Holton, who's the CTO and industry analyst over at GigaOM. He's on his hotspot on his mobile phone, everybody. That gives you a little bit of an idea of the technical problems we were having. He's got no internet at his place, but he also is having computer issues. And we also have Kevin McNamee, who's the security product manager of Nokia. He also is on a different computer than he originally was. So that's why we were having all our technical issues. Hey, today's event is sponsored by Nokia. Thank you, Nokia, for sponsoring this event about 5G security. We've been off for a little while, so I'm so glad we're back on. All right, lots of different ways to participate. You guys know how this is. Now, the bad idea we're going to do today is worst ways to protect IoT traffic. I was saying, worst ways to deal with 5G security, but what would you say to that? But we're going to just worst ways to protect IoT traffic. Howard, I think, gave us a really good bad idea, but I'm sure you're all going to come up with some other ones. But our 10% better tip will be how to improve security over new networks. And I'm saying that new because 5G security for many of us is going to be a new network. All right, please ask questions. This is a subject, I'm going to be honest, I don't know a lot about. I'm going to guess a lot of you don't know about. And I remember the last time we did the show on cybersecurity insurance, there was a lot of questions because a lot of us didn't know a lot about cybersecurity insurance. I'm going to guess you don't know a lot about 5G security or 5G networks in general. Again, it's my guess in general. All right. Today's schedule, you saw our good advice, bad advice, worst advice. You get your bad ideas in. You get your good ideas in. We'll play the public interest. We'll put up our polls. We'll play the Department of Yes. We'll have our last questions and advice. And then we will do our meetup. Do me a favor. Please stick around for our meetup. It'll be a lot of fun. I promise. And, oh, by the way, our next scheduled show will be next week. And that'll be Hacking Bad Permissions. And guess what? A link to register for that is right at the bottom of the screen. It's going to be there for the entire show. You can click on it at any time. It will not take you out of this discussion. So please go ahead and click on that because, by the way, if you register early, by next Tuesday, you automatically are entered in a raffle to win a CISO Series jacket. And by the way, Tim McClellan of WGBH from Boston, for those Bostonians out there, he is this week's winner. All right, let's get to our discussion at hand. Remember, everybody, I have prepped my guests absolutely zero because we were dealing with technical issues. So this is all going to be a shock to them. All right, I'm going to start with you, Kevin. High level, and let's be this brief because we're going to talk a lot about this here. High level, there's a lot of excitement around 5G and there's a lot of fear. How would you boil that down, Kevin?
Well, I think the excitement about 5G is the fact that it's the increased bandwidth, network slicing, the fact that it's going to be able to support all these additional IoT devices. I mean, that's the really exciting part about 5G. I mean, there's a lot of new applications coming, applications living out in the sort of the multi-access edge of the network, moving stuff out into the RAN. So that's the exciting part. 5G is new. It also 5G has a lot of security enhancements over 4G. So it's not all, I mean, from a security perspective, they fixed a lot of things. Now on the downside, 5G, because of the extra bandwidth and because of all the extra IoT devices that can be there, and also things moving out to the edge, these new features, they do present a new attack surface. Okay, so it's opened up the attack surface somewhat. This is a new area.
I think that's the understatement.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so that's basically the two things. So I think we'll probably get into these in fair detail today.
We are going to get into great detail. Howard, I want to know for you, what's your excitement and what's your fear?
My excitement is around kind of the networking side of the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of new things I can do with 5G that were harder to do before.
Mm-hmm.
Density, throughput, incredibly low latency, opens. Like, I'm really excited to see what it does for the future of trade work, right? Trade work's a huge problem in this country. 5G enables us to do AR in a way that wasn't really reasonable out in the field before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about what it means for the future of a city and kind of city planning and city management. When
that's what I'm excited about too. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. We could reduce traffic by 30 to 40%, traffic congestion by 30 to 40% through the use of 5G and IoT. That being said, I had an incident in my hometown. Someone hit a traffic pole at a high rate of speed, snapped the pole, the light pole. In doing so, they brought down the entire city network. Yes, there was apparently no security whatsoever on the traffic control management system through the city's network. One flat network, no security. Right? Wow. That was accidental. Someone discovered it. Obviously, I live in a small city. That being said, we start rolling out 5G, and an attacker can take control of that with relatively little effort. Mm-hmm. And any progress we may have made will be instantly undone by the fear snap response of a city commission, and 5G will go the way of nuclear power plants, right? That's my fear. My fear is 5G opens up a whole new kind of can of worms, as it were, more layers of security that have to be applied to get us to where we need to be, in ways that the operators are unprepared for. They will be either not configured or configured poorly, putting us in a position where more damage can be done, and we have a kind of snap response, which we tend to do.
Can I ask this stupid question, Kevin? Why is IoT so intrinsically tied with 5G?
I don't think IoT in itself is. I mean, IoT is something we've got in our home networks. You know, you've got the famous smart fridge and stuff like that. But what 5G is going to do is it's going to open up the mobile space. So you're going to see IoT moving. I mean, it already does exist in 4G networks, but the fact that it's there's just going to be more devices that are going to be deployed out there. Because 5G is sort of going to be ubiquitous. It provides the extra bandwidth, very low latency. And, people are going to use 5G just for general network connectivity. People will be using it in their homes and stuff like that. So the anticipation is there's going to be a lot more IoT devices introduced 5G, especially specialized applications using network slicing. You're going to be able to, people are going to deploy smart. Your traffic light's going to be talking over the mobile network.
By the way, Mike, right here. Hey, there's Mike Wilkes. Actually, I'm going to assume you're going to ask the same question you just asked in the chat, which I think is a really good one. But you have other comments. Mike Wilkes, please.
What was my question?
Your question about what makes a device IoT and what makes it an endpoint. And it's the protocols that it speaks.
Yeah, and Howard gave a first answer to it, but I was having a bit of a debate, I guess, with someone, because I feel like endpoint security has agents, and it's clear that my mobile device, my laptop, my iPad are endpoint. And when we think about asset management, I was referring to a lovely B-Sides presentation by Brian Contos on XIoT. And he was saying that people's asset counts are usually off by like 40 to 60%, and that the average company that he's done research on has between 3 to 5 IoT devices per employee. So if you think about, badge swipes and door locks and Nest thermometers and rheostats, and I think it was fascinating for him. Like I said, I put the link to the recording of the B-side session in there. The bad guys will compromise an endpoint, and then they'll go and remain persistent by going after an IoT device, which has no CrowdStrike agent, because they know they'll be expelled from that laptop. And so they pivot into the IoT because they have 50% default passwords, 74% end-of-life firmware. It's just really easy to hide and stay command and control on all of these devices that aren't even necessarily on your asset management, maybe mingled with your public network, private network, or anyway. So that my high level question is, I'm trying to figure out what's a good way to classify these devices. And you mentioned there's no user on an IoT, right? There's no interactive user session, but you can SSH into these embedded Linuxes, right?
Howard?
You can, but specifically what I mean is there is no user assignment. Not there is no control plane, right? But there is no user assigned to it. It is not Howard's device. It is the office thermostat, to use the thermostat. I think the statistic I have a little bit of a problem with, because IoT devices need to speak over Ethernet in order to be IoT devices, kind of, or some sort of network accessible protocol. Let's put it that way.
Like Modbus or something. But a lot of them are TCP/IP these days. But I was just thinking about when I worked at ASCAP, we had a $300,000 player piano from Steinway. And of course, the player piano needs to have an iPad, needs a network, and that would be an attack vector. You need to put it on a segmented, separate network.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's easy to breach.
We don't think about that having a user either, right? It is a device that is generally available. It services the greater space, and so I would call that an IoT device, not an end user device.
Mm-hmm.
We're also probably an agent on it, right? And so.
Yeah, or a coffee machine that phones home and says, "I need more beans." Send more beans.
Yep, or service. To your point on the printer, though, I think that's actually a really interesting question, because a printer is a kind of pre-IoT device, which I think makes it somewhat of an interesting question. And I would say, at what point does a device become a server might be a really interesting question.
Well, printers were the promiscuous device, because they speak every protocol. They have a web
that's
server.
his line that I've quoted.
Lots of really good, default behaviors, and they're easily abused. I remember hacking printers back in the 90s, and putting on, swear words, on the display LCD panels and stuff. And I don't think they've gotten any better. And certainly if it's an MFA device, and it's got an embedded web server, and it accepts Telnet, it accepts FTP, it does IP, protocols for printing. And so I think the printer is interesting because when it was hanging off of a USB cable or precursor to that, right, an RS-232 off of your laptop, and it was definitely an IoT because it didn't even speak Ethernet, right? It was a serial device and a serial bus, right? But now once you put an RJ45 on it, it becomes, I think, maybe IoT.
Yeah, I think IoT to me is just devices that aren't used as computers. It's got a computer built into it. It communicates in the network, but it's not used as a computer. So anything that hits that category is IoT.
That's a good definition. I can live with that. I mean, I'm just trying to think of a principle that works for asset management.
All right.
Because
we're going to move on from this, Mike. Hold tight. I want to move on to this question that John Procap has, and I think, Kevin, you can answer this one very well. Other than speed and bandwidth, are 5G networks radically different from 3G and 4G? Kevin?
Well, yes, certainly they are. I think, first of all, the entire core of the network, the control plane that controls it, has been changed. And it's been changed to make it much more secure than previous ones. They use strong authentication, encryption, and data integrity, and all those control plane protocols. Okay. The other thing that's been added is that the communication between service providers, okay, it's been, again, there's added a layer of security there, something called the Secure Edge Protection Proxy. So when you're a roaming user, for example, one service provider has to talk to the other to provide that roaming facility. So that's now been nailed down and secured. The authentication and the data management, again, has been vastly improved. they've introduced this network slicing concept, and anyone familiar with securing networks knows that network segmentation is one of the key things you do. You make sure, important applications are running on specific networks that you've applied extra security to and are isolated from sort of more general use. So these are things that 5G brings to the table. They've also fixed some vulnerabilities and privacy issues. Like, for example, with 5G, IMSI catching is something that's much more difficult to do these days. So does that sort of answer your question, David?
Yeah, I mean, it does. It answered. Did you want to add something to that, Howard? Because I can move on.
I think the only thing that I'll add is kind of as with any modern technology, right? The fundamental design incorporates security to a level that the previous generation just simply did not. Right.
Yeah.
When the LTE standard was created, the 4G standard was created, we didn't think about security in the same way we did. What we thought about was accessibility, availability, and iterative performance improvements or revolutionary performance improvements. Security was kind of this kind of long tail thing we eventually thought about. And 5G very much has kind of security in its architecture and design as a key stakeholder and a shared, has a shared voice at the initial table. That being said, it's also infinitely more complex, substantially more complex. Infinitely is the wrong word. Substantially more complex to design, build, run, and maintain 5G networks. Right? Just the concept of software-defined networking that is core to 5G, that enables you to do so much more within kind of the same hardware stack. Is a very different operating model for those who operate those things. And so while we've done all this for default security, what we haven't done is made sure that everyone knows how to deploy to best practices.
All right, people, we only have 3 bad ideas. I just want to throw this out. We only have 3 bad ideas. I need more. Remember, worst ways to protect IoT traffic. Quick, we have to go to our next game. Kevin, what do you want to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, in terms of the last question, there's also the multi-access edge computing aspect that it brings. And this enables the devices to take advantage of the low latency. So applications that require low latency can be deployed out in the RAN, in the radio access network. So that's another major feature of 5G.
All right, we got a game.
Do you know what others are thinking? On the public interest.
All right. Kevin, Howard, we're going to be playing our game, The Public Interest. I don't know if you've ever seen or played this one before, but these are going to be all new questions you haven't seen before. So here we go. Most average monthly search queries, what do you think gets more, 5G or mobile network? What do you think?
5G.
5G? What do you think, Kevin?
I'll go with 5G too.
5G, and the correct answer is? You're both right. 5G, yes. 1 point for both of you. Excellent. All right. What gets most average monthly search queries? Just IoT or Internet of Things?
IoT.
IoT, and no, you're both wrong. Look at that. Almost double. I was shocked by that one.
That's a lot of extra typing.
Yeah, it is a lot of extra typing. I was kind of shocked to see Internet
I don't
of
think
Things.
it's that shocking. I think people assume what IoT means and have no idea what Internet of Things means. You know what I mean?
That could be it. All right. 1-1. All right. What gets more, botnet or DDoS?
Botnet.
I'll go DDoS just to be the contrarian.
And the contrarian wins by a whopping margin. Look at that. All right, 2-1. Last one. Maybe we can even it up if you split. Attack surface or entry point?
I'm going attack surface on this one.
Attack surface.
Attack surface. And you both win. They're dead even. So you both win. Good job. All right. Thanks for playing that game. It's quick. Did anyone get 4 for 4? That one's easy because you can't lose on the last one at all. By the way, get your bad ideas. Worst ways to protect IoT traffic. And I don't think we have any good ideas on how to improve security over new networks at all. But we'll get to that. All right. Oh, we got more questions that have come in from our audience who are interested. Now Victoria, now she claims, she says, do you think Verizon, to both of you, is the best company for 5G? And if not, who is the best company for 5G? Howard is nodding his head, not a chance in hell. No, what's the best? I mean, when we say best company, I'm going to say best network there.
So in the U.S., strictly the U.S., T-Mobile bought Sprint. Keep in mind, the way you acquire bandwidth in the U.S. is through effectively a drafting system. The smaller you are as a network provider, the more priority you get in that draft. Sprint and T-Mobile were able to pick up all kinds of available bandwidth. Even if they didn't use them, those licenses all transferred to T-Mobile. T-Mobile has more bandwidth available to them, licensed network available to them here in the U.S. than anybody else. They're also sitting on a bunch of cash dollars, and less legacy network, right? So I think T-Mobile's positioned to be the most thorough provider of kind of 5G, and they have the bandwidth necessary to make it work.
All right. What do you think? We're by the way, we're delaying the best bad idea because we don't have enough bad ideas. All right, one more just came in. What do you think, Kevin? What do you think the best network is?
I'm going to just bail on this question.
It would look bad for you as Nokia to say that? Yes, okay, that's fine. I'm cool with that. All right. And Victoria, and I want to this question for Victoria is actually, I think, really good, and this actually probably speak more to you, Kevin, is she asks, are there new techniques for securing 5G compared to former network options? And I mean, that's one of the things that and you can speak also to what Nokia is doing here as well, Kevin.
Yeah, well, there's certainly been an evolution in securing networks. One of the trends these days is a lot of the service providers, they want to put endpoint protection on the network infrastructure devices themselves and on the servers that support it. So that's been something that Nokia has been obviously involved in, because we have to provide those types of, we have to enable the ability to put EDR agents on our infrastructure. So we've been working in that field. So that's something I think we'll see with 5G. You're going to see a lot more security deployed in the infrastructure itself to monitor what's going on both on the infrastructure devices themselves, and also to monitor the network traffic. So it's sort of a combination of EDR, NDR, XDR. I mean, that's when you combine them together. So I think that's something new that's certainly going to be. They're doing it with 4G too, but with 5G it'll become the default, the sort of standard.
And one of the questions I remember asking you before when we were chatting was, one of the fears that I keep hearing is just because of the attack surface expanding so much and so many of these IoT devices being on board that, I keep hearing that it's just going to swamp security, that the SOC will not be able to handle the load. Is that the case, or do we have essentially good filters in place to handle this kind of onslaught? And I remember, and I'm just going to answer your initial response is, it's not going to all happen at once, right, Kevin?
Yeah, that's certainly the case. But as you can see, when I mentioned the EDR, NDR approach, so that's going to monitor stuff that's going on. But it's sort of an arms race. Back in 2016, some software was released called Mirai. And what Mirai is, it's basically a software for building IoT botnets, okay? And so once you imagine you've got one bot, what it spends most of its time doing is it spends it scanning the network looking for other devices to infect. And when it finds one, it exercises that vulnerability and puts a copy of the bot in the new device. So these things expand naturally on their own. And then periodically, the owner of the botnet will give it a command to sort of DDoS this guy or whatever, or maybe do some Bitcoin mining, who knows. So the fact that with 5G, we're going to have a lot more available IoT devices, it means that these botnets are going to get bigger, faster, and they're also going to have more bandwidth available to do those things like DDoS attacks. So this is one of the things that we have to sort of protect. And I think the focus there is making sure your IoT devices are secure, making sure they're patched, making sure the OS is up to date. There's also a matter of visibility. Like, as I said, Mirai is scanning the network looking for devices. So if the service provider or the IoT device owner can somehow eliminate that visibility, like make the device, like put them in for example, a network slice that's not visible to the internet. That greatly alleviates the chances of the device being co-opted by one of these botnets and added to the botnet. So I think that's the way that we can solve the problem with 5G.
Mitigate
the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Right.
so I do want to say
Go ahead.
that's reduce the blast radius.
That's exactly it. That was
and-
your good idea at the beginning.
Yeah. While IoT, while VLANs help, VLANs aren't really the solution either, right? What we really want to do is get into microsegmentation.
Yeah.
We really want, if we're doing 5G, we really want 5G to start and end with zero trust fundamentals. Not rapid adoption, not rapid deployment, but zero trust should be the friction point, not the amount of time it takes us to stand up another tower, stand up another network, stand up another, SDN.
All right. Let's give it, because we're not going to be playing, because we only have a few. We're going to give 4 more minutes for we'll give it another 4 more minutes for the bad idea poll, Aaron, and we'll put that up in 4 minutes. So if in the next 4 minutes, if you get some more bad ideas, we'll put them up and then we'll put them to a vote. All right. Oh, and also, let me remind everybody, if you have not clicked the link at the bottom of the screen, please do that now. We're getting a flood of good questions that are coming in, and I'm going to... whoops, I'm sorry. Sorry, it bounced away. Let's see what Mike Phillips says. From my understanding, 5G has a shorter range than LTE, which means there need to be additional antennas. How much more difficult is it to secure additional antennas compared to LTE antennas? This is going into the weeds. Can anyone jump on this one?
It's a really good question. If you don't mind, Kevin, I'll hop first. So it's a really good question, right? If we think about it in the simplest form, I'm just going to do that. As we want to increase bandwidth, what we do is decrease the size of the wavelength, so we get more, right? So we get a tighter radio wave, right? When we do that, we also shorten the range, and much more importantly, we reduce the ability for the wavelength to penetrate. It's not just distance, it's penetration, right? One of the major telcos did an early 5G deployment. They used GPS data, right? Aerial photos from Google Maps to do their network planning. Those photos were taken during the winter. The trees had no leaves on them. In the summer, the network stopped working. Why? Because the 5G couldn't penetrate the water contained within the leaves. So to expand on your question, yes, it is far more complex. The wavelength is, in fact, a smaller wavelength, higher frequency wavelength. So you have a totally different scatter and propagation math than you would with 4G or prior networks. And so, yes, you do need more antennas. However, the total package that you're deploying when you deploy a new tower and a new antenna, it has also become much, much smaller and much, much smarter, and therefore it's not the heavy lift that it used to be to deploy them. And so you can put a 5G antenna, a mini tower on a bus stop, right? The little bench with the cover. You could put a 5G antenna there. You could put it on a telephone pole. You could put it on a light pole. And what a lot of cities are doing is, as they're expanding, they're not putting in light poles. They're putting in smart poles that have the ability to do multiple 5G antennas, 4G antennas, video cameras, whatever additional accessories. They're kind of like the Lego of poles to really enable this propagation of devices as cities kind of figure out what this is going to look like in the future. So it's a really good question.
All right. I got a question from Mike Wilkes that when I asked you, Kevin, are there issues with 5G standards being implemented differently? AK not really standardized. So they standardized, but they're deploying it differently. Have you seen this happen, Kevin?
I haven't really seen it as much of a major problem. I mean, it certainly is. The standards are interpreted, but the major, equipment manufacturers, Nokia being one of them, they're participate in the creation of these standards, so that the people that are creating the standards are also the ones that then give advice within their own companies as to how the standards are implemented. I mean, there's always room for wiggle room in standards, but I don't see it as being a security issue per se.
Okay, so it's not. We shouldn't be worrying about this.
I mean, we're on 5G is the 5th generation, so we've had 4 previous generations to sort of get this thing right. So,
That's a good way of putting it. Oh, actually, let me get to, before I do that, I'm going to ask you the question. Guess what? The bad idea poll is up, everybody. Go ahead and vote on it, because now we got a lot of bad ideas, so we appreciate that. So please vote on your favorite bad idea. And if you have not registered for next week's event, Hacking Bad Permissions, great topic as well, please click the link at the bottom of the screen. As I mentioned, you won't be taken out of this chat. You'll still be in this chat as well. All right. So we've done 4, we've had 4 generations to try to get this right. What, besides obviously allowing so much on the network and just we can have so much, let's pinpoint 1 or 2 items for you, Kevin, that excites you the most about 5G? That like we're getting right now that we didn't get right in previous generations?
Well, I think that for me, the biggest one, I've mentioned it before, but the biggest thing is the fact that the core of the network is now much more secure. It used to be with the 4G and 3G, if a hacker got access to the core network, they could do an incredible amount of damage because the protocols were just floating around on the wire. I mean, they could you can monitor the what's going on, and you can you can hack the protocols themselves. With 5G, because this is all strongly authenticated and encrypted, etc., even if the hacker gets into the core, there's a lot less damage they can do because they don't have access to they can't see the data, and they can't authenticate to sort of break in. I mean, they can still do damage. You don't want some hacker in your core network, but I think for me, from a security perspective, that is the sort of the biggest thing that they've introduced. And
actually, one of the questions that I had prepped here was, what are the horrible things that can happen to your 4G or 5G core if it gets compromised? How bad can the situation get with 5G now, or has the blast radius been controlled?
I think the problem is still there. For example, there's been a couple of, I think one of the most recent ones, Vodafone Portugal got hacked back in 2022. Mm-hmm. They were down for days. They lost both their 4G and also their whatever 5G they had. Fixed voice, television, SMS, answering services, business, the whole thing was gone. It was really, and that was basically a hacking group. They suspect it was lapses. They entered the network through social engineering and stolen credentials. Okay, so they get in to the network and were able to basically get into servers and take them down. And that's still going to be a threat with 5G. If someone gets in there and have got credentials and access and all the rest of that, they certainly can do damage. And the damages can be catastrophic. Vodafone Portugal was down for 3 or 4 days. They brought services back gradually, but the event lasted that long. Ransomware is also a huge issue. I was involved with, it was an Asian service provider, and they had a focused ransomware attack. People broke in and actually, over a period of about 6 months, it was one of these advanced persistent threat type of attacks. They actually stole the private SIM keys that are used, so they could actually impersonate that company's customers. That's pretty. They also demanded about $3 million in ransom, which was, I guess, for the big company like that, it probably wasn't that much, but still, imagine your SIM keys getting leaked to the internet. That's pretty damaging.
That would be good. Anything to add on your side, Howard?
So there's 2 things I'm excited about. 5G in general, it's the low latency, not the increased bandwidth that I'm excited about.
Okay.
Look at my background. When I say gaming on the go, it should be obvious that's something that I care about.
I see the controllers in the background.
Yes, but the on the go kind of ability that we have on 5G that we've never had before, I think is gonna give us a whole bunch of new kind of workload options that really didn't have a good customer experience. I'll put it that way before, enable us to do things that we weren't able to do. From the security standpoint, Kevin really hit on it, right? 4G and prior networks were kind of designed as default trust networks, and 5G is designed as default don't trust. So the radios authenticate to each other, right? So it's going to make it much harder for a hacker in DEF CON to stand up their own microcell and take over the 5G phone calls in the midst of a conference, which was DEF CON 7 years ago, right? Because the network, all the network components authenticate to each other, right? And so you have to be authorized to operate on the network. You can't just randomly insert a radio and all of a sudden you're part of the 5G. I think that's interesting. As to the core question, we also have to keep in mind the 5G core is not the core, right? These are going to run as mixed networks for a long time. So the core is going to be legacy for a good long time, right? And so while the 5G traffic will have one layer of protection, assuming they do everything properly, the core itself isn't necessarily going to be 5G for a while, right? Upgrading the totality of the network to these new standards is going to take some significant amount of time, right? And so we need to keep in mind that 5G is going to have to play nice with devices that are still supported down to 3G until the networks decide they're no longer supporting 3G, 4G, LTE, LTE plus, etc.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think even though you get 5G on your phone today, most of the time you're just talking to the 5G RAN, okay? And the back end is probably an LTE network.
Yep.
And the service providers are over time migrating, but you're right. LTE 3G is going to be with us for a long time.
Let's talk about control planes, because I know this is something that you led with this on the show, talking about that the more security controls. What is it? And again, you mentioned, but let's isolate it. What are the control planes we're dealing with that we didn't have to deal with before, or didn't have the opportunity to deal with before, Kevin?
So they have changed the control plane substantially, but functionally it still does the same thing as before. I mean, the basic gist of it is your phone connects through into the core and says, I'd like to set up a connection. That's the authentication is now done in a more secure fashion, so that it can't, IMSI catching is not possible and stuff like that. But functionally, it's doing the same thing. The improvements have mostly been to one major area, of course, is in network slicing. That is a brand new feature that comes with 5G. So that's added a lot of new functionality. They've centralized the data management aspects of the core network, so it's now done in one location rather than sort of spread out. And then, as I mentioned before, the communication between service providers is also a new security feature that they've added. But functionally, it's doing the same thing. It's setting up the call, getting you into the right slice, getting your data connection, your SMS messages going through.
All right. Let me check. We have more questions. Actually, I guess I'm not clear with the terminology. Is a slice more like a VLAN or a VRF? This is what John Procap asked. Can anyone answer this question? What are we referring to when we're referring to a slice? Excuse my ignorance.
The slice it's effectively a private network connection. In some aspects of it, I mean, it's going between things like routers and switches, and the slice may be implemented as similar to a VLAN or something like, because you're not going to put separate physical fibers to connect these things. So it's a logical separation. But what it does mean is that one slice is not visible to the other slice. There's no logically that you cannot communicate from one slice to another. So if, for example, a service provider set up a slice for a banking application, say ATM machines communicating, it would not be possible for someone in the regular data slice to be even see those devices or have any sort of access to them at all. They're completely separate, but separate from a logical perspective.
All right.
Does that
But
make
we have-
sense?
It did, but we have
Yeah.
a call that just came in. Hold on. Hold the thought.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
We're jumping into our game of Department of Yes. And I did not, again, I have to remind everybody, we had no time to prep for this call. So this is going to be brand new for both of them. I don't know if you're aware of this game called Department of Yes, but we have all these bad ideas that were submitted from our audience. And I'm going to challenge you to explain why you want to deploy these incredibly stupid ideas that our audience has submitted. One of them, I think one of you mentioned it in the beginning. And this comes from Mike Wilkes, who says, never change the default password on your IoT device so you can always know how to log in. I'm going to start with you, Howard. Why do you actually want to do this? Remember, it's a Department of Yes. You're trying to convince us we do want to do this. Why do you want to do it?
Sure. Well, I'm a CTO, and so what I like to present to my board before anything else is radicalized cost savings. And so I like to outsource absolutely everything to the lowest possible bidder. And then I change those bidders every 30, 60, 90 days. And it's been a real impediment to doing that if I have to provide them documentation. So this way I can just tell them to use the default username and password for everything. And I can get massive radical price saving, cost saving.
I like that. All right, Kevin, I'm going to ask you the same question. Why do you want to do this? Never change the default password on IoT devices so you can always know how to log in. Remember, you're trying to convince us why we want to do this. Don't be facetious.
Well, I think one of the things about like password management is that you need to add all sort of special system. Like if you want to like enforce password rotation and you want to do stuff like it's very, very difficult to implement that. And as Howard pointed out, it costs money. So it's much, and people, if you keep changing the password, they're going to write it down. They're going to put it in a file on their computer. They're going to save it in their browser, all the rest of that. And so it's opening up the attack surface because if you've got all these passwords that people can't remember, they're always going to have to reset it and et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be
So
crazy.
you're creating a lot of complication. I like that. Excellent answers, both of you. I want to just say that. Excellent answers for both of you. Okay. So this next one, this one comes from Jake Schroeder. Jake, thank you. A new submitter. I don't think we've had one from Jake. And I'll have you, Kevin, start with this one. Putting an IoT behind a restricted firewall defeats the usability purposes of the device. Instead, this is what Jake recommends, open up all ports from the internet to the device and ensure it can talk to the rest of the network as well. Why do you want to do this?
It greatly simplifies the access, doesn't it?
Again.
And also, if you've got diagnosis to do, everybody can get right through to it. It also enhances the ability to be members of botnets. So
Enhances. Oh, yeah! I'll give you a buzz on the enhanced ability to be members of botnets. I like it, though. Howard, why do you want to do this?
So I like security by crowdsource method and democratization.
That
and
is, isn't that the whole point of the blockchain?
I agree. I think in the future we won't even need administrators. We'll just open it up and let the community manage our networks for us.
Yes. All right. Sir, yes, sir! I give it to both. Both of you, by the way, played very well. Congratulations to both of you. Kudos. Good job. All right. We can also get the. I think it's time to also get the good. Let's put the. By the way, do we have any good tips? I know I saw one. Aaron, tell me in the back channel if we have any good tips. And again, my chronic joke to the audience is that they always have more worse ideas than the good ideas. Yes, we have one. We have one tip. All right, just tell me what the one tip is, and I'll tell the audience. I'm not going to harass them for more good tips. Paste it in here in the back channel. Here we go. From Dwayne, set up an IoT VLAN with firewall rules to keep them from poking around your primary network. Do you think this is a good tip, Howard? What do you think?
I think it's I'm sure someone would like me to say it's a 10% tip. I think it's a 5% tip.
Okay,
I
we'll take that.
I do think it's a good tip. And I think if you don't have an IoT VLAN, you probably need to go back to networking 101 because that should kind of be the default behavior today.
You agree with that, Kevin? You got to have an IoT VLAN.
Definitely. I think with 5G, you'd use special IoT slices to implement the same thing. So good.
Hence what you were discussing just earlier. Yes,
Yep.
and per John Procap's question as well. All right, how are we doing on time? All right, we got 15 minutes left on our show. This is excellent. Hey, everybody. Oh, by the way, Dwayne asked a really, really good, timely question, and this is the one I'm going to ask. Speaking of Black Hat and DEF CON, because this has come up. I've had people, I've been at DEF CON, Black Hat, where a woman came up to me and goes, I've already scanned your phone. So, speaking of it, should anyone attending adjust their phone settings to only connect to 5G? And heck, how would you do that? And would it be a simulated 5G, as you were mentioning, Kevin? What can we do here? Specifically around an environment like Black Hat and DEF CON.
I don't know if my phone I can configure it to only talk to 5G. It seems to do. It's got a mind of its own.
Is there anything we can do here, Howard?
There is. You can turn off roaming for sure, right?
Yeah, okay.
Turning off roaming would help. I'll be honest. I'm a longtime DEF CONer. I'll be at B-Sides, Black Hat, and DEF CON this year. If anybody wants to have a chat, by all means,
I'll be a Black Hat
but I take
myself.
Sweet. I take YOLO devices. Specifically because I don't do anything secure on them. I just it's not as unsafe as it used to be, and there's a lot of people that say they can do things that they can't do. But I kind of go with a security mindset that I don't normally have. My YOLO devices are pretty bare bones and are set up to not connect to Wi-Fi, and they are set up to only to no roaming. Right. I do mess with the network settings a little bit to try to tighten it down. But they're YOLO devices, so I also don't worry about it a ton. I find that that's the best way to kind of handle that.
I more think about you call them you only live once devices, not like burner phones. I guess that's the new term for a burner phone is YOLO device.
Well, it's not a burner phone. It's a device I just don't care about, and so I'm going to wipe it as soon as I get home. It's got no permanence to it. A burner, like I'm not looking to be anonymous. I'm just I'm willing to do things that I don't care. Like you only live once, so jump off the roof.
My other tip is do not stay at the Mandalay Bay, which is the hotel where it's at. Stay at a different hotel. Is what I always.
It's
recommend.
not any. Oh well, Black Hat's at the Mandalay, but DEF CON's now at the convention center. Right, there's no more DEF CON hotel. Yeah, they moved it.
Here, let me ask, because there's, we started the show. I asked the question of, the excitement and fear of 5G security. Kevin, what do you think is the greatest misnomer people have about 5G and the security around it? And if everyone could just walk away just knowing this one thing, it would be this. So, what do you think is the biggest misnomer, and what do you want everyone to walk away knowing?
That's a tough question. The biggest misnomer is 5G. You don't get 5G from COVID injections.
People are concerned about that? No.
I've never heard. I think the thing is because I've been fairly involved in 5G, I haven't really heard what these misnomers are. I mean, there was a whole bunch of issues with 5G antennas causing problems and stuff like that. There was protests over them and stuff like that. But that seems to have passed. I think one thing is people, as I said previously, you think you're on a 5G network, but you're actually talking through a 4G core at the same time. So you've got the 5G RAN services, but you're really still on a 4G. But that's going to change over time. I mean, the service providers are rolling out real 5G cores as we speak. I don't really have any good misnomers about 5G I can talk to. Maybe Howard.
What's the one thing you want everyone to walk away with knowing?
walk away with? Well, I think in terms of one thing we haven't actually talked about is how,
please.
what should you do to secure your 5G network?
Okay. Please
And I
speak
can
to
offer
that.
some
I'm sorry.
advice there.
I'm sorry we waited this late, but we've been talking about it. So what should you do to secure your 5G network? Please.
Yeah, I think first of all, you have to implement security end to end. You've got the RAN, you've got the mobile edge cloud or the multi-access computing. They have to be, and that MEC, multi-access edge computing, that introduces a new issue, the fact that you're deploying multi-vendor services out there in the RAN in a little mini data centers that need physical security becomes a big issue there that we never had to worry about before. Definitely the IoT devices, you have to have a plan in place to make sure IoT devices are properly secured. That involves the device owners, the device manufacturers, and the service providers. Each has a role to play in that. I think monitoring the network for malicious activity, having, EDR agents on the infrastructure devices and perhaps IoT devices is very important. And those EDR agents have to be designed to run in that environment, which is something new. Like most EDR agents are used to running on laptops and servers. And then also an NDR solution, monitoring the network traffic. The key thing is automated response. With these networks are large and complicated, so you really want to automate as much of your incident response as possible, and that can be done using modern SOAR type systems, SIMs and SOARs, security orchestration, automation, and response systems. Finally, and this is very important, and I think most of the service providers know this, is they have to have a disaster recovery plan in place and actually test that out to make sure that when the bad thing does happen, and they eventually will to some of these service providers, that they've got a plan to recover from it. If you've got a ransomware attack, what do you do? If you've got a hacker puts a...
So is it going to be kind of a little bit of a new playbook as a result?
I think it's an evolution of the existing playbooks they are. But companies like Nokia who make the equipment, they're working to create these new solutions so that we can be deployed in.
And are
5G.
you working with organizations to help them with these new security plans?
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
As I mentioned, like we've actually just recently released some products in the EDR space, designed specifically for telco networks. Same with NDR, network detection response, designed to be deployed in telco networks. Because telco networks are different than your regular enterprise IT style networks. They've got different characteristics.
All right. Everyone hang tight for just a second. I'm going to wrap up this show. By the way, click on the link at the very bottom of the screen if you have not registered for next week's event, because that link is going to change very soon. We're going to go a little bit longer because we started a little bit later because of technical issues, but we are going to go into our chat. So next scheduled show is next week, next Friday, July 28th, Hacking Bad Permissions, an hour of critical thinking about the domino effect of unknown access settings. That is going to be a fun discussion as well. Go ahead and change that link now, Aaron. Remember to register early because you'll be entered to win a CISO Series jacket, as Tim has won. Thank you to Kevin's company, Nokia, for sponsoring this Super Cyber Friday. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Now, starting in 90 minutes from now, or 97 minutes from now, we'll be doing Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review. We'll have Dimitri van Zandt-Vliet, who's the CISO of Dutch Railways. I actually had coffee with him just last week in Amsterdam. That'll be on the CISO Series YouTube, where I met a bunch of fans of CISO Series in Amsterdam as well. And stick around for the meetup. There you go. You can click on that link now. We will be rolling over when we hit the last, when we close out the show as well. And tell your friends to join us. Now, we're not doing it every Friday because of a lot of things for my travel and other random things, but most Fridays we're doing this every Friday at 1 p.m., 10 a.m. p.m. Pacific. If you want to sponsor Super Cyber Friday, just email me, david@cisoseries.com. Okay, enough of that nonsense. Let's get to closing thoughts right here. And actually, let me go to you first, Howard. Your closing thoughts, and like what Kevin was just talking about, securing 5G, your closing thoughts about 5G security.
Sure. So I started with a kind of a joke about being leadership and that outsourcing thing. I'd like to close with a serious note about leadership. I no longer do things based on the talent within my organization, but rather the ecosystems that I can assemble. And so I recommend when you're looking at 5G, especially when you're looking at your own 5G, right? That private or hybrid 5G, look to what ecosystems you have available and start assembling an ecosystem of talent, knowledge, tools, and awareness. Because while 5G has built-in security, it also has added complexity. So really lean into that to building those ecosystems, and probably start today, even if you don't think you're going to be deploying any private 5G.
Mm-hmm. All right, Kevin. Any last thoughts and ways people can connect with you, and also how they can work with Nokia on this 5G security effort?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's 5G security has been a question for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And I think both the equipment manufacturers like Nokia and the service providers have stepped up to the challenge. I mean, we've been talking to the service providers for years about this. And I think it's something that is well in hand. But obviously, there's, as I mentioned before, there's certain steps that you have to take to get there. Mm-hmm. And that's a process that's underway, and it's a process that will be evolving over time. 5G has got nice security features. It's got a bigger attack surface. And, I think, but we understand what the problems are. And I think we've taken steps to, at least we've got the toolkits to address them.
Okay. Well, I greatly appreciate you, Kevin and Howard, both of you bringing serious knowledge on a topic that I didn't know a lot of, and I'm guessing a lot of our audience was confused with as well, because we got a good number of questions that came in. Everybody, let's continue the conversation face to face. Both Kevin and Howard, you're going to be there at our meetup on the link at the bottom? Yes, all right. So do me a favor, click that darn link right now. If you've never joined us before, we'd love to meet you. We'd love to meet you. I'll be there, as will Kevin and Howard. And if you have some specific questions about 5G security, go ahead and ask us. If you have questions you just want to talk about or you just want to schmooze, be there as well. All right. I want to thank Aaron and Andrew for dealing with some serious technical issues at the beginning of the show. Thank you. And by the way, just so everyone knows, I think I mentioned at the beginning, this is not the original computer they were on when they first connected. So thank you. And Howard, I hope your internet comes back up as well. Everyone, click the link at the bottom of the screen. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Aaron. And thank you, Nokia. Click the link and let's have a chat over in the Toucan space.